Last week, we spoke to a security expert, and he was saying that the only way to rid the world of the evil dictator that is Vladimir Putin they're not going to get an election, he's going to control the media, is that we have to understand that this war in Ukraine is our war, and actually the best way to rid the evil man is to support Ukraine. But we made the point, and I'd love your take on this, in the middle of a cost of living crisis when people are struggling so badly, sir, this increased money, I know, causes, war fatigue, whatever. It causes resentment. But we need to get the message across that if he succeeds in Ukraine, surely, and puts one foot outside that country, we're all embroiled. Right or wrong?
Difficult to say right or wrong just like that. But what I would say is it's absolutely critical that we support Zelensky, that we support the Ukrainians to the maximum degree that we possibly can afford, and then a little bit more, because their security and the wider security of Europe are one and the same. And it's absolutely critical that we stand foursquare and continue to stand foursquare behind the Ukrainians and encourage our European friends to do the same, and also to get the United States to pass that law through Congress to unlock that very large amount of money that Zelensky absolutely needs.
Yeah, and what they need is ammunition, weapons. I mean, of course, in a military situation, you never have people on the front line who say, we've got enough of what we need. But I was reading a dispatch from Avdiivka of Ukrainian soldiers saying, we can see Russian troops, but we don't have ammunition. It paints a picture, Lord Dannatt, that the amount of support that they need from the West, from the US, from us is significant, and that we haven't coughed up enough yet.
You're absolutely right. But the issue is even more fundamental than that. It's not just a question of have we got the money, have we got the ammunition, have we got the industrial capacity, and is the industrial capacity that we do have working 24/7 to create the 155mm shells that the Ukrainians need. It's a tragedy that they had to withdraw from Avdiivka, sensible to reduce their own casualties, but a tragedy that they had to do so because they were very, very short of ammunition. It was one thing to talk about fine words about supporting Zelensky and supporting the Ukrainians, but this has got to be backed up by sufficient amount of weapons, material and training for Ukrainians. But I think to allow them to have a shortage of ammunition is nothing short of criminal in an international sense.
Today, of course, French President Emmanuel Macron will host several European leaders at a summit where he wants to boost their cooperation between partners in support of Ukraine. Do you understand, as a military man, I didn't put it too well, perhaps, but do you understand that people across this country, war fatigue, however you want to see, can't see beyond their own hardship and difficult times? I understand that completely, and I also understand that we need to give more. But it's very easy, isn't it, for military people to say they need this, they need that. I get that. But if you are watching this, listening to this, and you're struggling, you would perhaps question why you can't get a doctor's appointment, and yet we're sending this stuff. It's not something I share, but I guess you would understand why people are saying it, Lord Dannatt.
I completely understand that. And of course, the reality is that rockets and missiles are not slamming into British towns, cities and villages.
Yeah.
It is someone else's war. It's at arm's length. It's something that appears on television and on radio discussion programs. It's not something that actually materially affects people at the present moment. But the point is, the second order effect of a Russian success in Ukraine will have Russia pressing into other European countries, all of which, with the exception of Moldova, all of which are NATO members. And under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, an attack on any of those countries is effectively an attack on the UK, and we would be bound by international treaty to send British soldiers, airmen, sailors into this war, because that's what we're obliged to do.
Absolutely. That's what I meant when I said if he's successful in Ukraine, if he puts one foot outside Ukraine, it is our war. That's what I meant. I didn't put it too well at the beginning. And that sort of explains exactly why we have to do this, for the world order, in effect. And people will say, but you're likening it to 1939 and you're being a warmonger. No, we're not. We're talking facts here, aren't we?
You're absolutely right to liken it to the 1930s. And just reflect on these facts. In 1935, when Hitler was threatening Europe, our defence spending was less than 3% of GDP. In 1939, when appeasement had failed, it rocketed up to 18% of GDP. And in 1940, when we were fighting for our very survival, it was 46%. That is the price of fighting a disastrous war. there is a premium to be paid on deterrence. And currently, at 2.3% of GDP, we are not spending enough money on deterrence and therefore on our own defence. Politicians have absolutely got to go on making the case that, yes, of course, there's a cost of living crisis. Electricity prices are too high. We know that. But there is a wider issue that people have got to understand, that if we don't spend enough in support of Ukraine, we will find ourselves having to spend shed loads of money that we haven't got and can't afford because we're sucked in to a disastrous war. That's what we've got to avoid. And that's where the parallels with the 1930s are very legitimate and very fair.